Bon, bah écoutez, je recommence, mais là je vais resserrer un petit peu la
Right.
focale et on va
Okay.
s'intéresser en fait aux
On to the next presentation, but now I'll focus on farrowing pans
en comparant trois
and
performances
crates to compare the behaviors of
les
sows
évolutions en fait en
and
termes de logement en
piglets.
maternité.
So with respect to this topic, there are two key challenges to reduce the piglet losses and to limit sows containment. Now, to limit the loss of piglets, we've for many years set out on the lift a stall. The piglet is on that stall, which means that you can avoid crushing of piglets when the sows lies down for the suckling pigs. Now, to limit containment of sows, we have the crate, traditional crate, that allows for more surface area, comfort zone, to help both sows and piglets have access to specific comfort zone, keeping in mind that their needs are very different. There's also a shared zone for both the sows and the piglets, which leads to a crushing risk. As that being said, in the EFSA report, we've seen societal expectations with respect to the temporary confinement. I would like to speak to the EFSA report on future pigs, which has asked for an increase in temporary confinement for sows. This is what we will aim for, and therefore we wanted to look at the results relating to these temporary confinement crates, keeping in mind that we could also install a stall on a lift. So we have here temporary confinement crates with a solid ground, the L treatment, or with a mobile ground, the lift crate, which is the AL treatment. And we've compared that system with the standard crate. We've taken the temporary confinement crate and we've shortened that or narrowed that crate to reach, or rather to go from 6.5 square meters to 4.7 square meters, which is a standard crate in farming, pig farming. So we've worked on two farming pens of 24 places each. We had 8 L crates and 8 AL crates, so for lift crates and temporary confinement, and 8 B slots. We worked on 11 batches of 24 sows. Those were not consecutive batches. We worked on cycles of 7 batches. Here I'm showcasing here the 4 cycles, A, B, C, D. And these were not consecutive cycles, but the result was always the same for previous farrowing. Identical housing for all sows at the previous littering, farrowing. So, and the sows were weaned at, the gilts were weaned at 28 days. So now for the management, sows were freed and then contained a few days after entering the slot, and then it's on a case-by-case basis that they were freed up. Measures were focused on newborns and looking at the causes of losses. With respect to retirement, we looked at the duration of farrowing, access to time, the duration of access to teats, P1, P5, P9, P13, and for 24 hours looked at how often the piglets went to the comfort zones. Comfort zones as part of the temporary confinement L and AL. There was also an additional auxiliary lamp set up, and on the right-hand side you can see a rug with a lamp. When the stall was opened, we looked for 4 hours in the morning before opening the stall, the amount of suckling pigs and the number of suckling pigs, the sow's posture, and we've done this test again a few days after opening the stall. The next following Monday, we've looked at the relationship between mothers and piglets, and also at a full feeding by the sow of its piglet. We've studied 25 sows, and the following Monday we studied all the sows. Looking at the farrowings, they were longer and more variable in temporary confinement crates, 268 minutes, but the difference was not very significant. If we look at access to teats, again, we haven't seen any difference in treatment on the time taken by piglets to access the teats, whether it is in B, L, or AL. The only thing we've noticed is that piglets 1 and piglets 13 took longer than other piglets to access the teats. Now, with respect to use of comfort zones, 24 hours after farrowing, this period of 24 hours was managed in 4 stages of 6 hours, green for blue and purple. And in the B section, we see more piglets in the comfort zone over that 24 hours than in other systems used. We also see that this comfort zone, or rather, this zone is increasingly used over time, and in the temporary confinement crate, the comfort zone with the lamp is much more used than the zone with a rug and a nest where the animals would go in the first 24 hours. When the stall was opened, we looked at the amount of time sows were on their legs. There was no difference before the treatment, but once the stall was opened, the next day the sows spent much more time on their legs standing than sows A rather, were longer on their legs. And then sows B the next day followed through into the footsteps of sows A. If we look at the amount of suckling pigs and the duration of suckling, there's no difference between the different treatments, but AL sows and L sows more often put an end to the suckling than sows B. Looking at use of the mixed zone, it increases once the sow has been freed. That makes sense because suckling takes place in that zone, but there's no difference between AL and L sows. Looking now at litters, at farrowing and after dog fostering, we've done inter-treatment fostering. There's no significant difference between all three treatments, yet we see one difference before stalls were open at day 5 and at weaning, a difference in between the two treatments. We don't see any treatment differences between AL and L treatments. At the fostering of 0.3 piglets, we see the same amount at weaning. Also a difference between B and L treatments. This gap is due to the fact that there are 0.5 piglets per sow being that are suckling piglets. Between the three treatments, at birth, opening, or weaning, no difference in sizes. Now, looking at the changes in litters, looking at survival rates of piglets, if we look at the different stages before the stall was opened, the trend is to see fewer losses with the AL treatment than with the other two treatments. But if we look at everything else that has been done after the stall was open, there's no significant difference in treatments, even if L sows are a little bit above other sows. After opening, losses are much lesser than before the stall was open, and no significant difference in treatment, even if here we notice that there are a little bit fewer losses on B than on the other treatments. In total, the total loss is of 17% and to the tune of 19 or 20% for other treatment types. Now, it's interesting to look at the mortality causes and how they spread out for the three treatments before the stalls were opened. And there's a difference between the L treatment and the two other treatments. how are we to construe these results? So you see here a observed amount which differs from the theoretical amount. So the difference in the AL treatment relates to fewer crushed or crushing related mortalities. However, there is a larger amount of weak piglets than in the other treatments. After the stalls open, we see a difference between AL and L is found on crushing of piglets. Now to look at the results on farrowing, the duration seems longer and more variable than for AL and L. So there's time that goes by between the containment and the farrowing. We don't have enough data, however, to expand this topic, but we should look into it. There's lesser access for piglets to the comfort zones for AL and L regions, and there's more significant sensitivity to cold. And when we remove the lamp after 1 day, so piglets will be more sensitive to the cold and become weaker than for AL piglets. And also in these animals, they can have access difficulties to the teat, and there's also a risk for the piglets to be crushed if they feel cold and get closer to the sow. But this risk is limited with the AL treatment relative to the L treatment. And so we need to improve practices to create a comfortable and warm intermediary zone for piglets, and to also quickly facilitate access to the comfort zones. Also, with respect to piglet losses, I've shown you that they were higher than at the national level. That's related to the experimental studies we've made, 8 sows per treatment with treatment fostering, so it's harder to manage all the fostering, and that can explain the results. We also have less assistance given to the piglet, to the sows. Now, no significant difference was noted on piglet losses. Maybe we could look at when the stalls are open, and also when the clutch is activated on the lift and on the crate. Now, with respect to piglet behavior, when the stalls open, we see more activity for the sows, so better, more positive impacts on the sows, and a better management of suckling pigs. In other words, the sows put an end to the suckling period more often in the temporary confinement than in the live crate and temporary confinement, so it can better manage its suckling pigs. So finally, we have similar results between the systems. Now, we still need to fine-tune some of the management practices based on the accommodation or housing chosen, but the studies done on this topic should lead us to have more information in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.